Welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. We're delighted that you're with us today, and today is Thursday, May the 15th. And we are honored and delighted that you're here to share this space with us and that we get to keep moving forward into a deeper and deeper relationship with truth, with the energy field in which we each live, move, and have our being, and working to understand when it is that we function out of that which is less than love, what it is that's separating us from our true nature as human beings, and how to be restored through our true nature. If you hold a newborn child, there's no question about it. I mean, this is a question that Jeannie and I have asked of tens of thousands of people all over the globe. In about every culture, I've asked the question in China, I've asked it in Tibet, I've asked it in Greece, I've asked it in Italy, all over the globe, England. And everybody, when they stop and remember the moment at which they held the newborn, they describe the essence of the newborn with the word that is at least some variation on the theme of love. And I'm offering, there's a reason for that, because that is prior to us being engrossed in the world. I use that word quite purposely. We each functioned or existed as this presence of love. And when you'll remember there's an old scriptural quote, and we're talking physics here, we're not talking theology. There's an old scriptural quote that says, "Do not be conformed or do not be molded by this world." And the warning that goes with it, do not be molded by this world, or you'll end up moldy. If you buy into the world's hostility and fear-based games, then those energetic patterns literally, remember the physics we talked about yesterday with Max Planck, who is the father of quantum physics. What does he say? I've never seen matter. What we call matter are these particles of energy drawn together by an intelligence. If our intelligence is stupid, that sounds like an oxymoron, but it's not. If the energy we move with is hostility and fear, then we literally, on a physics level, it can be proven in the lab, we literally pull together atoms in a way that are incoherent with our integrated state of having a physiological device to this body mind unit. And go back again, hold that newborn, imagine you're holding the newborn, you tap into the newborn's essence and you describe the newborn as love. Then ask yourself the question, is the newborn loving you, or is the newborn love? And everybody goes, of course, the newborn isn't even aware that I'm here. The newborn is love. Yeah, got it. It's a noun. It's not what we do. It's what we are. And you'll notice for most of us, when we are molded by the world, we come into a family system, we come into a culture that knocks the awareness of the presence of love out of us because we have people around us who've lost their awareness of themselves as the presence of love. That gets knocked out of us, and we're taught a false definition. You're supposed to love me, i.e., approve of me. And once that's knocked out of us, then, around about 15, 16, 17 years of age, we're sent out into the world totally brainwashed into a false definition, false goals, because now we're told to go find somebody to love or somebody to love us. And we're on a total false, fake journey that covers up the truth of who we are. What this work is about is removing the blocks to the awareness of the presence of love that you are and that everybody else in your world is. Now, somebody says, wait a minute, you should have seen the horrible, terrible, evil, wicked, nasty, ugly things that person did. Certainly they aren't love. Yes, they are. They come from a long family of people who have ended up in denial and dissociation from the truth of who they are. And yeah, there's all kinds of ugliness that gets into the minds of those who don't know who they are. And most of those things are passed on to us genetically, they are inherited. And you can do some research on the trauma being inherited, that they're proving in the lab that the literally the enzyme activities in someone's body, the genes, the hormones in someone's body who comes from a deeply traumatized parent are different from the person who comes from the parent who has not been deeply traumatized. We're talking physiology here. Now, we can go back into the ancient teachings, which, what I've been working from for 45 or so years now is the first century Aramaic language and the teachings of the man named Yeshua. He's popularly known as Jesus. That wasn't his name. And he wasn't teaching theology. When you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear what he was teaching, when you read that material in the original Aramaic, what you see, what you hear is that this is a language of physics and physiology, of psychology and genetics. When they said the sins of the fathers will be passed, yea, unto 3 and 4 generations, they weren't giving us some kind of, you're going to get punished for what your parents did. They're just telling you how physiology works. Literally, as energetic beings, the physics of life is that we are an integrated energy system designed to incarnate and bring into the world the active expression of who we are as love. And that's not something we can do. It's what we are. And so if we've been brainwashed by the generations through the power person dynamic that we've spent the last several weeks talking about, then when those energetic patterns in us are resonating into activity, they come up and take over. They become the advisor. You might remember again that passage that I just quoted. And again, this isn't theology, but here is the quantum wholeness that's spoken about by the physicists. The theologians, I said the other day, we have the privilege of being separated by a common language, said Winston Churchill. What the quantum physicist calls energy or quantum potential, the psychologist calls the collective unconscious. The physicist calls energy. The theologian calls God. We're all talking about the same thing. And when you start drawing all together, whoa, the picture grows and makes a whole lot more sense. But let's go to that specifically, that scriptural quote. And here's the wholeness. David Bohm, physicist who speaks of unbroken wholeness. That's the goal. And that if we're broken, i.e., if we're traumatized and cut off from the presence of love, striving to get back to wholeness, it's like broken into parts. The parts can't get back into wholeness. We use the metaphor of Humpty Dumpty. What did he do? He sat on top of the creation, a great wall, and he fell. And all the power people, all the king's horses, couldn't take him back to wholeness. You've got to make the space for wholeness to show up. You can't, from a fragmented place, reconstruct the whole. It just isn't possible because, as the principle in physics says, the sum is greater, or pardon me, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So here's the creator saying, the sins of the father. Now, let's remember that word sin in Aramaic has nothing to do with what the Greek horror story is. It's simply an archery term. If you were on the archery ranges and fired at the target and missed the bullseye, the scorekeeper yelled sin. All it means is you're off the mark. You missed the target. You missed the bullseye. Actually, evil is the word that's used in Aramaic to describe you missed the target altogether. So when they say the sins of the fathers, recognizing that as energetic beings, every energy we engage in is stored holographically in every cell of our structure, including the sperm and the egg. And were you to conceive a child tomorrow, that child would have in its structure literally every thought you've ever thought, every feeling you've ever felt, every reality you've ever engaged in, every unresolved energetic dynamic that the generations have held. And every feeble hostility and fear-based attempt to bring about wholeness, to bring about correction, to get what we want. So what's he saying? Here's the creator, the wholeness, the unbroken wholeness, speaking to us, saying, you want to get back to me, but you're separated from me. The sins of the fathers are the things that separate us. The incoherent energies held in tissue, which means held in mind as well, are the things that cut us off from. Now, in that particular passage, if you go to the end of it, the sins of the father are passed, yea, unto 3 and 4 generations. And the way it's translated by the Greeks is of those who hate me. It's got nothing to do with hating. That word in Aramaic is those who are separated from their own wholeness have only their generational patterns and their power person dynamic to rely on for directions in behavior, for advice. It's not until you open yourself once again, and you do that by, again, in the Aramaic, the veil of the temple must be rent in twain. That's not a purple curtain in a church. That's the barrier between your own subconscious and your own unconscious mind. The temple is your own incarnation place, your own body. And stored in that body-mind unit are all of the generational energies of the past. And if that's your advisor, then you're going to live out the title of my book. Why is this happening to me again? The objective of this work is to put an end to the why is this happening to me again experience. And to put an end to the why, and I feel so blessed. I was actually, this goes back, 1992, 3, I was working on this book, and I'd been invited by a magazine, a singles magazine in Fort Lauderdale, to do an article on relationships. So I wrote this article on relationships, and when I write, I'm slow. I write, I rewrite, and I rewrite until I've got 10 ideas packed into each sentence. And I had written that article, and I was working on my book at the same time. And I went back. The title of the workshop, the title of my book at that point was The Miracle of Forgiveness. Like, duh. And I'd written this article, and I went back. I was contemplating the title for the book. What was that going to be the final title? And I went back to the article, and I had started out with the words, "Why is this happening to me again? Are all people the same?" And it was like, bingo, there's the title of the book. I haven't ever run into anybody who doesn't do the "why is this happening to me again" experience when they tell you the truth. And the reason for that is because we're creators. Now, the world has shut that idea down. I mean, everybody loves the idea of being a creator, except when the creation isn't going so well. And then, don't you know who the problem is? And isn't their name always them? So what happens? We go from unconscious creatorship, following the generational patterns of our only advisor when we're cut off from love, our only advisor, the fathers and the mothers, the generational patterns. We follow their advice, and we create out of that. And when the creation shows up, as we talked about David Bohm, the physicist, yesterday. He talked about, admitting one's own incoherence is a tough game. Denial runs the game. And so by about the age of 4, virtually every one of us became a very devout, religious, card-carrying member of the one world universal religion of blame. Even people who call themselves total atheists are members of that church. They got a story in their minds about how everything in their lives that isn't running perfectly is somebody else's fault. And it's time to come back to ownership. And so we're delighted that you're here, and we'll just look at this idea of ownership from the perspective of, what do I have to do if I see that I've been through this particular painful reality 87 different times with 42 different people? Sooner than that, I have to go, I was there every time. Maybe it's my problem. Maybe I'm the one creating this. And remember, we talked about David Bohm as a physicist. He came up with the term sustained incoherence, that we think in a way that produces problems in our lives. We deny ownership of the problem. We keep on thinking that way and producing the same problems over and over. A physicist is saying that's called sustained incoherence. Now, the theologian would look at that one piece of information and say, oh, that's what we call living in sin. The psychiatrist would hear that conversation and say, oh, that's what we call someone who lives in denial. And so undoing those states is what this work is really about. And so that's precisely who we are. Speak to ourselves in a way of ownership. And we've got someone on the line, and I'm going to open the line to Harry. Welcome.
Hi, yeah, I've been listening to you for a long time, so I wanted to ask you a question about an issue that I've had when I have already forgiven someone.
Right.
And
First mistake.
well,
So,
yeah,
well,
okay.
before we go further, because if we leave that idea of forgiving someone in the conversation, we can't ever get to the truth if we accept that as a base premise. So one of the ideas of this work is never ever forgive anyone for anything, but learn to forgive continuously. Just like those who live in blame, we've been given a false definition. We've been given a false definition of love. The next thing we've been given a false definition of is forgiveness. That of course, if I'm a member of the one world universal religion of blame, my mind shows me a picture where you're at fault. And of course, what logically follows is if it's your fault, then I'll let you off the hook. I'll forgive you for what's happening inside of me. And that does nothing to address or change what's happening inside of me. However, once I realize that forgiveness has nothing to do with letting other people off the hook, I stop forgiving people and I live in an accurate definition of words. And if someone does, there are people who do crazy things. And so if someone does something off the wall, crazy, evil, wicked, whatever you want to call it, then I want to properly apply if I choose to. Of course, there's no requirement for this, but I may choose to pardon them to let them off the hook and then realize that the behavior they did resonated pain in me. And now what I want to be is responsible for my pain rather than saying, when you did that, you really hurt me, which is all denial language. That all comes from that one world universal religion of blame, to move into, and we've got a tool called responsibility communication, to move into responsibility communication where it looks more like, well, Bill, what you did was really terrible and it was nasty. And I recognize that there's a problem there. And, what I'm going to do with that is let you off the hook. I'm going to pardon you for that. And now I'm going to go in and realize that this pain moving in me is mine. And I'm going to properly apply forgiveness to literally remove from my physiology my capacity to even generate any form of pain. So pardon whoever does it, and then do the forgiveness work would be the first step.
Right. So I
How does
believe
that affect your question?
no, it reframes it, and I believe that the forgiveness work has been done because I had a revelation and an epiphany around how I created relationships that didn't um, that weren't that I was doing, that in this relationship she was doing to me what I had been doing to others in the past,
Mm,
and in a way of sort of not letting me in, or in the past I hadn't let my partners in the past.
right. Got it.
And so
Nice catch.
um, what's that?
Nice catch.
Thanks.
That's a life changer.
It really, really life changer. And so while I'm processing that, because it's such a big catch. I'm still experiencing the same traumatic events over and over again from the mother of my child, and so it makes it very challenging, because I and rightfully so, like, I'm recognizing the hurt that I've caused in others, showing up as her hurting me.
Right.
And but it's also not good for our child either, and I'm trying to figure out how
Absolutely.
to to arrest that behavior. um and I just don't know how to arrest that behavior, because the wounds are deep on both sides.
Got it. History. So notice that there's still a belief that she's imposing hurt on you.
True.
And that would be your next forgiveness process. You know, if there is no hurt in you, there's actually a great story in let's see, I think it was the Book of Thomas, one of the books that wasn't canonized. And Yeshua is with the disciples, and the Pharisees are all over him. And the disciples are like, kind of, why don't you sock it to them? Why don't you give them back some of their own medicine? And Yeshua just says to them, I have none of that in my store.
Wow.
Like, that's not in my unconscious. You can't hurt unless there's hurt inside of you. Now, somebody can come punch you in the nose, and it's like, that's painful. But in terms of what people call, you hurt me when you said this, is no. But I have some hurt in here that when you say that resonates, and I become aware of it. And so as you start to own your own capacity for hurt, and we actually just got a letter from someone about 2 weeks ago who started doing this work back 30 years ago, and she recounted how she was sitting in my workshop, and she remembered the moment at which I said, as you do this work, there'll come a point where people will do the same things that you always proclaimed hurt you, and you'll just sit there and you'll laugh to yourself, and you'll be totally free of hurt. And the word she put in her letter a couple of weeks ago is, that's too. I sat there and heard you say that, Michael, and I just believe that was bullshit. And her letter was to recount how there's a family situation going on, and that she's able to just look and go, this person's doing this off the wall crazy stuff and thinks they're hurting me. And all I'm doing is holding a space for them to get through the other side of it. So the next order of business I would offer would be to let go of this fallacy, this belief that's developed through, virtually all of our family systems, that somebody else can hurt me. Again, somebody can punch me in the nose and inflict pain, but that's different from hurt. Hurt is an internally generated process. And, again, we've all been trained to be members of the one world universal religion of blame, so our hurt is somebody else's fault. I'll send you a link to our streaming workshop called Communication. Did you hear what I think I said? And in that workshop, we point out the difference between what we call projection communication. You really made me mad. So if there's mad in me, and I put it in my brain's image of you, I can pretend that you're the one who's the cause of my mad, but I'm the only one that's been there every time I've been mad. That's about me. So that's projection communication. Responsibility communication turns it around into responsibility. And it's like, I realize that when you do that behavior, it brings up a lot of rage and a lot of hurt in me. And I'm really ready to move through this hurt. Would you support me? So because projection communication, however gingerly it's done, there's a form of communication out there they call iMessages. However gingerly it's done, if you want them to be responsible for what's going on inside of you, you're fostering more and more and more and more conflict and blame. But really, truly coming to the place of ownership, and the communication is about how this is mine. And I'll offer that over the years, like in our intensives, we do a lot of direct role play. People will play out, or will work with each other. And in terms of watching an instant shift take place between two people in conflict, the responsibility communication tool is one of the most powerful that I've seen. That just just right there on the spot. Because the minute, usually when you're interacting with someone and you're trying to convince them they're responsible for what's going on inside of you, they're people who live in a lot of hurt and they've been blamed a lot. And
Right.
so all you have to do is start the sentence. You made me, and you don't even have to tell them what they made you. Their blame comes up and their defenses come up, and if their defense is attack of some kind, then bingo, you just asked for attack. That's, if you really look at that in relationships, that's how it works. When I turn it around to absolute ownership, and I'll offer in the space that when there's a big history, this is one of the most challenging pieces to do, to actually be able to communicate where one holds the BS, the belief system, that you're to blame and you're the cause of her hurt, like you've believed that she's to blame and she's the cause of your hurt.
Right.
When one can truly language and energetically own, this is my hurt. Whenever you do this, and that's a point if you've got a history, usually the response to whenever you do this will be, well, I didn't do that, what are you talking, and be back to that defensiveness. But when you can start to break that down and really communicate that you're in ownership of, I'm realizing that I've got a lot of unresolved pain in me around this, and I'm really ready to be done with it. Would
Right.
you support me? And
Oh, you say that to the person that you perceive hurt from, even if
yes,
you perceive that person to be adversarial?
yes. We've got a worksheet that lays out step by step how to do that in a way that, again, it's more difficult if you've got a history, but over time, if you communicate using responsibility communication, it will disarm the blame response sooner or later. Now,
Right. We'll count on later, but yes. Well, no, you
yeah,
know what? I won't claim that. So
yeah,
could be sooner.
I'll support you in being yesterday. And to recognize that, we use that metaphor of Humpty Dumpty. What's the great wall of Humpty Dumpty? Literally, each of us is born creators sitting atop of this giant creative force, whatever you choose to call it, whether it's energy in physics or God in theology or, the collective unconscious in psychiatry, whatever you choose to call it, and to really reconnect with that presence of love within yourself. Every silent energetic message that you send changes at that moment.
Mm,
And all but the most conscious people in the world do nothing but bounce around off of other people's unconscious messages.
right.
And it's been proven in the in the lab that to just, when you recognize from a physics point of view, thinking a thought means the movement of electrons. Throw a pebble in a pool and ripples come out from the pebble hitting the surface of the water. Move an electron in your mind so that you have a thought, and the movement of that electron sets up an energy field. If you have a mass of hurt that matches the matching bag of garbage that your partner had that has a mass of hurt, all that has to happen is that start to move in you. You don't have to say a word, as you probably noticed. And they don't have to say a word, as she's probably noticed. Sooner or later, we each have to stop coming out of our corners swinging and move into a state of responsibility. And when you can communicate responsibly, it tends to break down the barriers. When someone sees that, wow, he or she really is taking responsibility instead of blaming me again.
Right. It just changes the energy and creates an opening.
Exactly.
Thank
Exactly.
you, Dr. Michael. I'm going to let you get
Absolutely
to your rest of
delighted.
your calls.
Okay. Well, I have another thought for you if you've got another moment.
Absolutely. Do you mind if I
Okay.
drop down into the audience?
Well, actually, Jeannie is on. has called in too, and I was just going to see if we could get her on the line with us, and maybe she's got a thought or two, because this is something that, of course, Jeannie and I have worked with and practiced with. So I'm going to just bring her on and say hello.
Hi, Jeannie.
Are you with us, sweetie? Okay, just 1 second. Let's see if we can do this.
Hi, Jeannie.
Are you there, Jeannie? Okay, there we go. It looks like Jeannie popped in when I hit the button that time. Are you there, Jeannie? No, can't hear
Hi,
you.
Jeannie.
No, I can see that you're still in, but Jeannie looks like she's in, but she's not. So
Okay, well, thank you very much.
she's speaking. All right, sir. Awesome.
Okay.
I'll see if we'll do another round and get Jeannie on and see if she's got any thoughts to share. Awesome. Thanks for your questions. Appreciate it. Get time. All right, sweetie. I'm not hearing you. Okay, it's showing me that you're in, but I guess we're not. So, all right, cool. Tell you what, why don't you hang up, Jeannie, and just restart, and let's see if we can get you back on. Okay, well, it doesn't look like that's going to work. So, anyway, so responsibility communication is one of the most powerful tools that we have. And when I can shift out of, and it's not just a matter of shifting language, when energetically I can shift out of blame and be responsible for, yeah, I've been through this hurt 87 different times with 42 different people, and I'm ready to be done with it, then sooner or later I need to wake up to the truth. Is where forgiveness. Hey, Miss Jeannie, we'll try again. I just hit the button. Are you with us? No, can't hear you. Okay. Well, my apology. All right. So we'll move forward with looking at this dynamic of who's your advisor. Remember that, each of us has a personal code. Actually, we have a thing called a personal code evaluation. And the personal code is the rules that your unconscious mind has for advising you on what to cycle in your mind and what behaviors to do. So each of us has a personal code. We can say, like, we've seen the alcoholic. How many of us have seen the alcoholic that did something really terrible and what everybody would agree was traumatic and horrible and all of that? And the next morning when they wake up and realize what they've done, they're so apologetic and they're so deeply, I will never do that again. I promise. I'm sorry. I will never do it again. And they mean it. But unless they do the work of going inside of their own personal code and forgiving the dynamic that's locked into their mind, and it's 99.99999% of the time it's based in a power person dynamic, until they've gone in and forgiven that, the next time the stress is up and the chips are down, they're going to do that exact same behavior again. It's just how the mind runs. That's like one of the rules of the mind. So that's one of the reasons why we have a personal code evaluation, because as I said yesterday when we were talking about David Bohm, he talks about this state of incoherence with which we create the same circumstances over and over again, denying that we're creating the circumstances, but continuing the thinking that created the circumstance. Remember, as a physicist, he called that sustained incoherence. And that owning one's own incoherence is one of the most difficult things there is to do. Why? Because we think or speak as though somebody outside of us is the cause of what's moving inside of us. That's called denial. When we think or speak as though something outside of us is the cause of this which is moving inside of us, we have to hide what's moving inside of us to be consistent, to look sane to ourselves. So what happens when I speak as though you're the cause of my pain is I have just instructed my mind to dissociate from the true cause. When I dissociate, I create for myself a totally unnatural condition called an unconscious mind. And now my advisor is unconscious. The evaluation breaks a person's personal code down into 10 different areas. Stress management, honoring others, honoring self, honoring truth, freedom from fear, freedom from hostility, uh, honoring laws of living, nutrition, digestion, toxicity, use of will, and what we call consistency or validity. And the evaluation is based on what's called the MMPI. If you're familiar with the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, it's kind of the gold standard of psychological testing. Well, we've done an abbreviated, the rendition of that works for our purposes in terms of utilizing these tools and showing people where their blocks are. Most people live in blockage of truth. Here's how blockage of truth works. I have a lie. My mind generates a construct of a lie. You made me mad. I believe my lie. Now, remember, there are only 9 bits of data possible. That Harvard research has showed that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, the max amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. Once that 9 bits is full, everything else bounces off. So if I proclaim my lie to be true and I fill my 9-bit mind with it, I'm now living in blockage of truth because there's nowhere for truth to show up in me. Until I do that genius thing that Yeshua brought forward 2,000 years ago that you will not find anywhere else on the planet, called forgiveness. You cancel a goal, and when you cancel a goal, what's occupying the 9-bit mind collapses. Now there's a clean and open space within the mind for truth to show up. People who live in a lie, calling it the truth, are stuck in blockage of truth. And they are, I guarantee, they're going to be asking themselves the question, why is this happening to me again? Or we'll get calls at Heartland. Sometimes people are looking for my book. It's like, I understand you have this book. Why are they doing this to me again? Or why am I doing this to myself again? You're a creator. If you fell from the wall, Humpty Dumpty, creatorship, if you fell from awareness that you've created what happens in your life, then you've created a totally unnatural condition called an unconscious mind. And you remember 2,000 years ago, this man who gave the advice on how to forgive said, take care of the heart, for out of it are the issues in life. Notice they didn't say take care of the other guy, for out of them are the issues in life. And that word heart in our modern updated language would be the unconscious. Now, my offering is, having worked with this work for the last half century, is having an unconscious mind for a human being is a totally unnatural condition. It is a result of living in denial. And denial is not a river in Egypt. When we live in denial, we're cut off from the content of our own minds. Everybody else can see it, but we're cut off from it. Now, if you talk to a psychologist today, most of them will say, well, about 90, 95, maybe as much as 98% of our so-called thinking, and I would say it's not thinking, it's just cycling information, is unconscious. How far are we away from our natural state if 90% plus of what cycles in our minds we are unconscious of? And how much power have we turned over to that part of us that produces and produces and produces the same result over and over and over again? And we don't see that we're producing the result. Again, sustained incoherence, a la David Bohm. We don't see that we're producing the result because we live in blockage of truth. We won't let that. You got to own your own incoherence. Now, if we spoke about that in another language, they'd say, you got to own your sin. You got to own the energies that are off the mark in you. And then you apply the technology of forgiveness. And this technology, as far as I know, in the last, tracing it back at least 17 or 1800 years, has not been available anywhere on the planet. This technology was disappeared that long ago. And it's so simple. I love how the Course in Miracles says it. It is so simple, it cannot but fail to be misunderstood. And the core of the forgiveness process is, you will notice that the only time you're upset, unless you're just a generally miserable person, the only time you're upset with someone is when they're not fulfilling a goal you have for them. Notice when you want them to do something and they're doing it, you're pretty happy with everybody. But you want them to do something and they're not doing it, and what happens? The mind goes nuts. Now you think it's them that are nuts, but it's your mind that's nuts. It's your mind that's in blockage of truth. And if you don't understand how the personal code works and you don't know where your blockages are, it's really tough to break through. So in our personal code evaluation, we have a set of tools, a specific. If this is where your challenge is, say it's honoring others, then here are the tools for cleaning up your honor of others. If it's honoring self, here are the tools. If it's stress management, here are the tools. If it's nutrition, here's what you need to do. So when you start coming back into harmony with who you are as a human being, when you start coming back into harmony with love, which the theologies would call God, creative force, then you're not cut off from the best advice the universe has to give. Again, cycling back to what I started with, the sins of the father, that is the power person dynamics, the advice of the generational pattern flowing through your own personal code. Remember you said, I'll never do that again, but when the stress was up and the chips were down, you did it again because your personal code demands that you do it. You cannot act outside of your own personal code. It's not possible. You've got to change your personal code. And ultimately, that's one of the bottom lines of this work, is changing your personal code. Because once there's enough stress and one of your blockages is activated, whatever your power person did to you to control you in that circumstance, that's what you'll do. The thing that you hated most, that your power person did to you, when you're ultra stressed, is what you will do to others. And that dynamic's got to change. When you engage in forgiveness, you weaken the voice of the power person dynamic. And now what happens? You're no longer in hate. Again, that quote, sins of the father, 3 to 4 generations of those who hate me. No, those who are separated from the active presence of love. If the 9-bit mind is filled with hostility and fear, there is no room for love to be there. There is no human life active in a mind that is filled with hostility and fear. There's just no human life there. Well, I shouldn't say it's not there. It is there. It's just there's no room for it to express. There's no room for it to be what it is, because that 9-bit space, that conscious space, is the vehicle for expression. So when you apply forgiveness, and again, what do you do to forgive? You cancel the goal you hold for whoever your object of attention is, whether it's yourself or someone else. Well, but Michael, I have this wonderful goal for this person to just honor me and cherish me. And damn, they won't do it. So guess what you have to do? If you want to access the dissociated part of your mind, here's what you must do. And why are we at a point where 90 as much as 98% of our thinking is unconscious on planet Earth with human beings? Because we've been cut off from this solution for that long. In Aramaic, the word forgive is shabag or shabak, and it literally means to cancel. You locate the precise, specific goal that you have for your object of attention. You cancel that goal. When you cancel that goal, that which is occupying your 9-bit mind, your perceptual mind, collapses. Now, this isn't a very nice image, but remember, everybody had this one burned in. The 9/11 towers were hit, and they collapsed in on their own footprint. Imagine that 9/11 tower is your errant pained perception. When you cancel the goal, it collapses in on its own footprint. Now, remember Carl Jung, probably the top psychiatrist the world has ever seen? He said, until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. How do you make the unconscious conscious? You got to make room in the conscious mind. How do you do that? You cancel the goal. You collapse the pain perception. And as it collapses in on itself, you now are in direct contact with your own unconscious dynamics. If you're paying attention, up will come the memory, up will come what needs to be dealt with. And when you begin to let go of those things, you're free. Now, it's not Dr. Feelgood. It's not fun to allow that to happen. For most people, the generational unresolved trauma, terror, hatred, vengeance, rage, guilt, murder, literally, that's what needs to be dealt with. If it's energetically in you and unresolved, guess what, creator? It's going to show up in your life, and it's going to show up as an external event. That was another thing that Carl Jung pointed out. What we refuse to own shows up as something that is expressed in the external world. But when I collapse my pain perception and I allow myself to drop into the part of me that holds perhaps some of the deepest pain, some of the deepest sorrow, rage, guilt, fear that humanity has ever experienced. This is not something that happens spontaneously. This is something that most people want to run away from. But the only way to heal it is through it, to go through it, to call on the resources, to have the brain cells for the tools. And my original work was in the field of electronics and designing, repairing electronic equipment. And for me, in that educational process, it didn't matter what your philosophy was. If you were designing a piece of electronic equipment, you were repairing a piece of electronic equipment, when it came off the other end of the bench, it had to work. So what I've spent the last half century doing is looking to every aspect of this whole reality that we live in, this actuality, and to bring it to a workable tool. How do we get it to where we can cause change to happen because we have a tool that works? And that's precisely what, my study and work has been for the last half century. Delighted. And we've got a caller, so I'm going to hit the button and say hello. Hey there, young lady.
Hello, Michael. How are you this morning?
I'm rocking. I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. I have a question about a worksheet that I'm working on, if we have
Yes,
time to jump into that. Okay,
let's go for it.
okay. So I got to the bottom of the worksheet and I'm just not sure where to go with this, whether it needs to go to
Okay.
another worksheet or responsibility communication or what would be the best next step. So I, Terry, who am love, am experiencing the emotion of resentment. Um, on and on. My trigger is that my husband gets to have whatever he wants. And the thought that is creating this is a thought or the emotion is it's not fair. It's not equitable.
So I take it the other half of it is he gets to have whatever he wants, but I don't. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
And
For
that's not fair.
starters. Right. Yeah. Which of course absolutely not true. But anyway,
Okay.
this
So,
is what I came up with. And I've got 9 other sentences and probably about 3 or 4 other emotions that need to go along with this. But
right.
um, so anyway, I want to punish myself by overeating.
Let me
And
ask a question before you go into the punishment, before you go to the next
sure.
step.
Okay.
Something that's going to be really important for the healing in every worksheet we do, but in this one in particular, is going to be to really look at the real underlying goal. And I can easily see that it would be easy to do a goal where I want, my husband to be fair. But I can also see, although he's the object of attention here, I can also see that where the real underlying goal is might be something like really being about life, and I want life to be fair. Or maybe might be, well, I want dad to be fair or mom to be fair, or
Okay.
I want to be fair. So they would all be variations on the theme that would be really important to tap
Mm.
into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Each of those, you know, I suspect at this stage in your relationship that the fairness issue goes back further than your husband.
Of course. Okay. Yes. 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 Of
Okay.
course. Um,
Uh-oh, this is one of your 77 times 70 worksheets then. Very cool. Hey, it's nice to be up against one of those.
Yippee! Hoo-hoo.
Yay.
Get out the cheerleaders.
Yeah.
Okay.
Punishment.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, just for maybe for conversation's sake, or just to actually get it out of my brain and into the air,
Right.
what I put for 5A. While holding love, conscious, active, and present, I now choose to collapse my mind's goals. So what I really want is for him to care about, honor, recognize my line of thinking, my logic, my reasoning, my opinion. So when I
Okay.
went back and look
Each
at
of those is
this,
a different goal. And
okay,
it sounds like the real core of it, just listening to that litany, it sounds like the real core of it is that you want to be honored by him.
okay, instead of life to be fair, it's like I want to be honored.
Yeah. So it might be I want, this would extend back to perhaps parents, siblings, childhood friends, neighbors,
Okay.
employers.
Uh-huh. Okay. 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 We've got
And
about
he may
25
be getting
worksheets
the
now.
brunt of what, if we had a conversation with him, he might say, "What?" And he may be
Mm-hmm.
getting with the brunt of, especially when I hear your voice tone go up, as we talked about, brought the idea of work employers in. He may be getting the brunt of something that really isn't his, and it may be,
Mm-hmm.
but Just from the
Hmm.
way your voice tone changed, I suspect that maybe there's a little more blame being put in his direction than he deserves.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, actually, when you said neighbors, yeah, it brought something up when you said neighbors.
Mm.
Um, if I'm bullying, but okay. So yes, thank you for all of that. I can see several worksheets already developing. When I got to the part where I invite Ruka to incline me toward healing, um, what came up for me was mutual inequality. Inequality,
Hmm.
not mutual equality, the absence of mutual equality.
Right. Got it.
So is this in line with honored? Or, I mean, is there, do I need to hit it like right on the nail head, l- like to get the wording right to be
Well, remember
effective?
that the whole, that's why I brought up the variety of goals that may be involved here, because until you hit, remember, we are energetic beings. The mind works by resonance and energy. Until you hit the right frequency, the energy
Right.
of the goal, that, when you imagine, if we were to imagine the unconscious mind, if you've ever been to the Library of Congress, their card catalog,
Uh,
drawer after drawer after drawer after drawer. That's
mm,
the human mind. And all these things are filed away. And you have to have the right combination, the right frequency to get the right drawer to open that holds the core issue.
right,
So
right.
identifying the goal that's really the one that's involved there. And, and it sounds like now you're getting back perhaps to something even deeper into the patriarchy and
Mm-hmm.
how women have been pretty much globally treated in our culture. You look
Mm-hmm.
at the Taliban mindset of controlling women that unfortunately is moving big time into America today as well. It's really another major issue that we all need to be cleaning up inside of ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, that did actually occur to me because that is something that does trigger me. Um, for instance, um, oh gosh, this feels so horrible to say this out loud. Um,
Go for it. We're
well,
with you.
my this is what I heard, and I will say it as a quote. Um, a person in my family line of origin
Hmm.
was lamenting that one of my daughters is not hooked up with a man yet, and her lament was, um, "I just want her to have a good man to take care of her."
Mm,
And this person, my daughter, has
how
always done,
disempowering.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, she's always taken care of herself. She's lived on her own, making a good income, never had a problem with her. She's just beyond, and she loves her
She's
life.
rocking.
She
Yeah.
loves her life the way it is. Yeah, I've got a couple of grand dogs, and they're all amazing. But
Yeah.
yeah, the patriarchy. So
And the person who made the comment is probably in a pretense about how wonderful her life is because, and this is her way of projecting that and maybe getting a chance to see it,
well,
what
this
she needs to
person,
deal with.
okay, I may not be following you because the person that said that is actually in a state of misery pretty much 99% of the time.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay,
That
say it again.
I wasn't sure whether her misery was conscious or not, but my offering is by saying that about your daughter, she's probably revealing the pain that she's in.
Oh, yes. Okay, okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
for that. All right,
It's her
so
her way of taking that unconscious dynamic. Where's a safe place I can put this? Oh, I can't put it on my husband, or I can't put it on my pastor at church, or I can't put. Oh, your daughter. Yeah, see, she needs to have, and she's probably reaching
yeah,
for, a way to start to deal with that in herself.
yeah, yeah. And unfortunately, my husband agreed with her. So
Yeah.
it's in the line. And okay, so I need to do the worksheets before I do the responsibility communication. Is that correct?
Well, it will probably come hand in hand because you'll do a worksheet or 20 worksheets, and it will uncover many things that are under the surface. And then as you communicate about those things, that will take you to another level of seeing things that are under the surface.
Okay.
When our caller called earlier, and as I gathered, there was a time when the blame was all her fault, and then he did some work and went, "Oh my God, she's just doing to me what I've done to others."
Right.
And each layer you go to, there's another. I mean, you never know what you're going to find there. That's why they call it the unconscious, and that's why Yeshua made the point of, you got to take care of that unconscious, or you're in deep trouble, because it's going to keep showing up and biting you in the butt.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I know we're over time. If I could just have one more
We're
question
good. Go
at
for
a
it.
time. Okay. When it comes to responsibility communication, I had something come up. I did a couple of worksheets on it, and then I decided to go ahead and have a conversation with my husband, taking full responsibility for it myself, saying this is all about
Right.
me. These are just my words. These are inside of me. So is it appropriate or inappropriate or helpful or not helpful when I haven't totally processed through something and I have a responsibility communication for the purpose of me just getting it out of my brain?
Right. Well, my offering would be, if you're still feeling kind of skittish with actually, it would be easy to slip into blame conversation again.
Mm.
What I would suggest you do is you do a written responsibility communication. You take the worksheet
Mm.
and you go through and write the whole thing out,
Okay.
because in doing that you'll get clear, and make sure that your objective is that your realization is that you own what is painful in you,
Yeah.
and then that you're truly asking for support in healing that. This is something I want. I'm looking for support and healing. Would you support me? And what I've observed over the years is that if I'm truly speaking from that space, goodwill comes forward in everybody and says yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And then
Okay.
the next layer comes up. I remember there was a particular intensive we were doing, and there was a woman who was a therapist, and she had her daughter with her. And she was talking about how her daughter did this and her daughter did that and her daughter did this and her daughter did that. And her daughter was in the workshop, and her daughter's sitting there like, well, well, come on up, let's do some responsibility communication. And literally, I mean, I wish I'd had this on video. I mean, this one was a therapist. And
Mm.
she initiated the responsibility communication with her daughter. And she did everything she just accused her daughter of doing, sitting right there in front of the class with her daughter at the front of the room. Everything she had just accused her daughter of, she did in the communication example. And that's how the unconscious thrives this. So it's a process,
Mm-hmm.
but writing it out in advance, and then, owning, perhaps using your written form and just saying, I know that I have a tendency to go into blame. I'm going to be responsible for that because I really want to clean that up. So I've written it out, and I want to make sure I stay with my responsibility, and then I'm really clear that this is about me healing me.
Yeah.
And
Right.
the other beauty of that is when you model that, for most people on the other side of that type of communication, they've never seen such a thing before. They can't fathom it's possible. And you
Mm.
just gave them the example. When you model something, people tend to be able to start to follow that modeling.
Yeah.
So it tends to open a whole new space.
Great. Okay. Looking forward to doing all these worksheets this weekend.
Awesome. We'll be holding space, dear heart. We'll see
Thank
you
you
on
so
Saturday for
much.
Still Point Breathing.
Saturday? No, I will not be able to be there this Saturday. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I
All
think I
right.
let Jeannie know, but yeah, I'm
Cool.
gonna have to miss it this time.
All right.
But
Next month.
thank you. All right.
All right.
We'll see you
Blessings.
then.
Take care. Bye-bye.